I'm happy to pass some remarks on the Blasphemy, Abolition of Offences and Related Matters Bill 2019 here tonight. When the 37th Amendment of the Constitution, repeal of the offences of the publication or utterance of blasphemous matter, Bill 2018, was going through second stage in September of last year, I began by acknowledging that the issue of removing the offence of blasphemy was a source of deep concern for a very significant proportion of the population. I shared the view that respect for authentically held religious values has been on the decline for decades. Anti-Catholic rhetoric in particular is rampant. Indeed, some have even described such views as the last acceptable public prejudice. That said, I supported the government's bill to repeal the blasphemy clause from the Constitution. As our Lord said, "Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." While many of us have wished matters to be different, it has been clear ever since the 1996 Constitution Review Group report that the contents of the offence of blasphemy are totally unclear and are potentially at variance with guarantees of free speech and freedom of conscience in a pluralistic society. And that the end has been coming for a particular clause in Article 46(1) for some time. The issue also received a substantial and detailed analysis in the 6th report of the Constitutional Convention, which was established by the then government in 2012. As I understand it, however, the Convention voted in favour of including a new constitutional provision against religious hatred, with 53% of members in favour and 38% against, and 9% undecided. I am aware that many people saw the position I adopted as some kind of concession to those who want to remove even the mention of God or the sacred from our culture and society. That is emphatically not the case. I simply hold the view that it is not tenable for the state to involve itself in the making of theological judgments, much less enforce specific theological and philosophical judgments by any one particular creed or church. I believe in the separation of church and state. I do not believe, however, that the separation should become a division, which some people would like it to be, a big division. The church has a vital role to play in our society, and it works effectively in a spirit of collaboration with the state on so many issues. That role needs to be respected and protected. It is not appropriate for the state to act as the guard dog of any particular church. Such a position harms both church and state, an outcome that is in no one's interest at any time. In the broader international context, we know that one of the arguments put forward for the abolition of the offence of blasphemy was that it gave encouragement to other regimes where the penalty for such offence was death or some other awful physical punishment in some other jurisdictions. There is merit in that view, but it's not the entire view. I'm conscious now that perhaps we should have investigated that claim a bit more with a bit more detail, because while we wanted to give the impression that we are now an enlightened people, the record of the state when it comes to protecting those who suffer religious persecution for their beliefs is very mixed, to put it mildly, Minister. In fact, in November of last year, I asked the Taoiseach and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade if he made representations to the Pakistani government or its ambassador regarding the high-profile imprisonment of the Christian Miss Asia Bibi for blasphemy. I also asked him if requests had been made to his department to offer asylum to the individual and the person's family following the public disturbances and disorder following the individual's release. The Taoiseach assured me that the Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion, and that Ireland works within and alongside the EU and the UN to address the persecution of religious minorities wherever it occurs. But indeed, those words are fine and dandy, but we don't in actual fact. And Deputies Grealish and Senator Mullen and I visited Lebanon some years ago, and it's a hot topic at the moment and a pretty difficult topic, talking about the refugees and asylum seekers. And we met the Syrian refugees in the camps up in the mountains, and thankfully we were there a few days before we met them, and they gave us a fair falter, a wonderful welcome. Young children and indeed very old grandmothers in many cases. And they told us of the persecution, the savage persecution. And they told us of how all the men had to flee, and they got only 24 hours to either leave or be slain. And we were pretty chastened by what we heard and saw. And we returned here to this Parliament, and to get a debate on it, no debate on it, the persecution of Christians, and indeed many minority and Houthi tribes, Muslims as well, not only Christians, are being slaughtered. And it's sad to say that we found out that under Saddam Hussein, under Gaddafi, and under the other dictators, so-called, they had freedom to practice their own faith, full freedom. And then the coalition went in, the American and English and all the rest, and blew the hell out of the place and caused massive destruction. And now they have slaughter, and we saw communities, countries, states, just minorities, just genocide of the worst order, and no meaningful debate here. And we tried, and we tried, and we tried. Government kept paying lip service, no debate, because we didn't want to offend the Americans or offend the British or whoever. And yet, Minister, yet it was rather poignant that when we looked for topical debate for 3 or 4 of us, I think, together, and we got the topical, and it was ironic that it fell on a Holy Thursday evening, the evening of the Last Supper, actually, and it was very poignant, actually. But that's the only debate we had, that 4 of us members got together, and thanks to the Council for forgiveness. Any reasonable debate we have about what's going on in the Middle East and the atrocities, and we pay lip service, and the Taoiseach is telling me that under Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion, and that Ireland works within and alongside the EU and the UN to address the persecution of religious minorities, wherever it occurs. They do not. We are shamefully lacking as a country to work. We have a proud record of peacekeeping all over the world, our army indeed, a proud record, but as far as this is concerned, we're just a nod and a wink, and maybe we might raise it here or there, but nothing publicly, nothing said, or nothing, no proper calls or demands as a sovereign, indeed neutral country, that this not be carried out in our name, and that we won't facilitate, and that we won't allow Shannon to be used and for situations like that to be for munitions and indeed plane loads of soldiers going to and from the Middle East. What's going on in the Middle East is just unbelievable. And it was one of the best experiences of my life that I went and saw for myself what's going on there. But to think that we have no debate on it here. We have debates on everything. We have people going to the courts today to get a debate on money mistresses. We have debates on what you name it, broad range, but we have nothing when it comes to our international role and human rights and the protection of human rights. We did look for help here when we were being persecuted ourselves. But of course we have citizens now being persecuted here again in Ireland by the banks and by everything else, the system, and we don't look after them either. So the Taoiseach wasn't correct when he said that, that Ireland works within and alongside the EU and the UN to address persecution. We don't. Shamefully, abysmally absent. Our voice is absence, our voice is silence. And that is pitiful and shameful for a modern, free country. But the case of Asia Bibi, a Pakistan woman, convicted in 2010 of blasphemy and sentenced to death, does make the very commitment, that commitment very clear. Following an appeal, the Supreme Court of Pakistan overturned her conviction, thankfully. In fact, we have commended the judges of Pakistan Supreme Court for doing so and for upholding the rule of law in a very difficult situation. And we do commend them, and thankfully her life was spared. Minister Coveney also went on to say that Ireland attaches great importance to the fundamental of human rights and the freedom of thought, conscience, religion or belief. But again, how credible is that when we see doctors being threatened with removal from their jobs if they display a conscientious objection to abortion? Pretty hollow. Pretty hollow. How credible is it? When we see medical doctors and nurses and practitioners, and we see them being threatened with removal from their jobs by Minister Harris if they display a conscientious objection to abortion, to the taking of a human life. Shocking. And be threatened for fear we haven't enough of scarcity of doctors and nurses. And I salute the courageous ones who have refused to have any hand act or part in that savagery. I supported the government last year during the blasphemy referendum, not because I wanted to see a respect for God or the sacred diminish in any way. I did so primarily because it has been clear for years now that our courts and legal system have found no meaningful way to prosecute an offence under the previous blasphemy law system. So little point having a law and statutes if we couldn't enforce it. Very little, and there are many laws and statutes are barely enforceable, and some not enforceable, and some not even attempted to be enforced. But it's very odd, is it not, that while arguments are being made that this bill will increase and protect freedom of speech, the reality points totally in another direction, Minister. Totally a different direction. Polar opposite. In fact, we appear to be getting ready to out in place a kind of secular blasphemy law where it will be a criminal offence to say almost anything deemed offensive by the great and the good who constitute the new elite in our society. And we are going down that road on a slippery slope, and the great and the good, and we're not allowed to have a contrary view. We can't even have parishioners and indeed people in small rural communities who want to be welcoming, who want to be engaging, and who have a full of generosity. Look at the money they give to the hospice and to God knows what, and to the missions and everything else. And then if they have a contrary view, Minister Flanagan threatens them, told them back off. We need to have debate and discourse. It's not a dictatorship we have. You think it at times. A community cannot express reservations about disproportionate immigration because that is now deemed, or soon will be deemed, as hate speech. It's ridiculous. I said the best of communities that have every organisation in the community is voluntary, from tidy towns to Community Alert to Meals on Wheels, Vincent de Paul, hospice, you name it. Welcoming, engaging community. That's all they want, is to be treated with some modicum of respect by the government. A government who has taken everything away from them, every last vestige of what they should be entitled to. And all I said earlier, all they want is to be allowed to live in peace, not to have the heavy-handed law down on top of them, and then when they want to do this work, or when they want to have reasonable consultation and proper services put in place for our people who come here because of immigration, who have fleeing from what I saw in Syria and Lebanon. And we see the powder keg that Lebanon is, and they need to be listened to and engaged with, and not talked down to, and not dictated to by ministers saying, look, put up or shut up. And you're lucky to be getting them. This is and I blame the officials in the Department of Justice as well for not having a template at this stage. And Boris O'Kane and Tipperary, not that they want to be used as a template, but they can be used as a template now, because the same thing happened here, shoddy, underhand work. Next thing they found out about it. But they had a public meeting. And I salute Councillor Joe Hannigan, Carhill up there, and indeed the other 4 members and the public for coming together and had a proper discussion. And when unwanted visitors came in shouting hate speech at the meeting, they were told where to go. And now they have walked out, and they are welcoming the Syrian refugees, and are welcoming family and more families to come, with understanding and acceptance and stepping up to the plate and doing their bit for our less, lucky neighbours from yonder in Syria and elsewhere. It's handled when it's handled that way. And when I mentioned Ballardreen the other night, where there was this quiet when it happened, and then the local Feroga group got involved, and wonderful. Salute them for doing it. Got involved with the teenage children and the younger children, because that's, remember, what I saw was women and young children. And I have no problem with them coming at all and welcome them, but I had problems with the figures, and the Taoiseach alluded to at the weekend, the massive figures here from Albania, from Georgia, where 99% and 97% respectively have been refused entry here, because they're not refugees, they're not fleeing any war, any persecution. They're coming here clearly as economic migrants, and then that many of them have been deported. And I have the figures, I just don't have them with me. 99% to 97% refused by our system here, and I salute the people working in the system and deportation orders, but less than 70–80% of them have left. Where are they? We can't afford that kind of money, and the millions, 50 millions and 60 million, we can't afford that kind of money here. We're a small country, and people will want to come here, thankfully, because we're a reasonably wealthy country and prospering at the moment, a reasonable prosperity. Parents cannot express difficulties and challenges around our school ethos and faith matters, because this is now being seen as non-inclusive and disrespectful to those who have no faith. It's shocking. And the Catholic Church, Deputy Connolly and others have demonised them, and many others here, day in, day out. But for them, many of us wouldn't be educated. And they ran the hospital through the matrons and the nuns, and they did so much work. And we should respect that. OK, there were bad apples in every battle, and that happens. But parents can't express difficulties and challenges around school. The rush now to destroy our ethos and destroy our what has stood as good stead in time, and there's a rush to throw it out. Those who have, because there's no any educated together and whatever, I have no problem with people like that. But they're not dictating about what should come down from the hospital and what religious artifacts can be displayed here and there. It's not the Muslim people and many Muslim doctors that we have, and we support them and welcome them. They have no issue with the crucifixes and everything else. But these so-called liberators, atheists, they have a big problem with it. They want to banish everything like that. Thankfully, we had Mass here this morning, celebrated by a wonderful priest, and had it in the Count Corner's dining room, and had a good turnout. And a holy Mass for our members. But we hadn't it here from 09 till about 13. Couldn't have it. The media wouldn't like it. Oh. We're running kowtow ahead of the media, ahead of the Liberals, and we're going to end up with nothing. We will see how this legislation works out in the courts. We will see how the bill before us and the bills around free speech and so-called hate speech will work themselves out as well, Minister. My feeling is that they will just become the new sacred idol, and anything or anyone who challenges them will be guilty of secular blasphemy. We have to remember, too, that the Constitution, as it currently stands, provides, and I quote, "The state acknowledges that the homage of public worship is due to Almighty God. It shall hold his name in reverence and shall respect and honour religion." How can we get that balance right, Minister? Do we even care about the part of the Constitution anymore? Very selective of the parts that we want to promote and the parts we want to trot on. Because attempts to remove that section will not be as easily supported for me, for one. Our preamble states, "In the name of the most holy Trinity, from whom in all authority and to whom, as our final end, all actions, both of men and states, must be referred, we the people of Eire, humbly acknowledging all our obligations to our divine Lord, Jesus Christ, who sustained our fathers through centuries of trial. Gratefully remembering their heroic and unremitting struggle to regain the rightful independence of our nation, and seeking to promote the common good with the due observance of prudence, justice and charity, so that the dignity and freedom of the individual may be assured, true social order and attained, the unity of our country restored, and concord established with other nations. Do hereby adopt, enact and give to ourselves the Constitution." Tommy, quick now. To my mind, that preamble speaks to much more than respect for God. It speaks to issues surrounding how and where laws get their legitimacy. Are our laws just about majorities? Or must they reflect the moral law written into the hearts of men and women, I ask you, Minister? That is why any attempt to remove the preamble will not be supported. Blasphemy laws in our state were a dead letter for decades. It was not possible to bring an effective prosecution, so something had to happen to remedy that. I just hope, Minister, that we can ensure that religious people of all all persuasions, can have their views protected from deliberate attempts to ridicule or attack.
Thank you, Deputy. That concludes the second stage debate. Minister, do you want to make some concluding remarks?
Indeed. Thank you very much. Indeed, Cathaoirleach, and on behalf of the Minister for Justice and Equality, I certainly want to thank all the members of the House present and to those present last night for their considered contributions and their views on this bill. Can I say the Minister acknowledges the broad welcome given by all members of the House in relation to the bill itself. I also welcome the level of consensus on the bill, which appears from deputies' contributions both last night and this evening, which echoes a very high level of support, I think already apparent, as most people have said here in the House, on the people's vote that we had on this issue on the referendum last October. I also believe that the intention of the Minister for Justice and Equality, assuming the bill is accorded the passage through the remaining stages of the House, will be to commence the bill as quickly as possible. Could I just say, maybe note a few comments from Deputy McGrath, and as he is in the House, and thankfully he's going to stay. I know your reference to what's happening in the Middle East is something that I have a particular interest in as well. When I was chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I met all the minorities. I met all the interest groups during that chair. And I'm sure the present chairman, Deputy Smith, and his committee are doing that as well. So maybe he could note that the Foreign Affairs Committee works really hard in that area. In response to his comments made, can I just say to you that the Minister for Justice has already spoke yesterday in his speech presenting to the bill to express the government's abhorrence at the use of reference to the contribution of blasphemy as a criminal offence in Ireland, and to justify that the prosecution of religious minorities in certain countries, such as the case mentioned by the Deputy, I think it's important to note that as well. And also in relation to the Deputy's reference to the preamble and to Article 44(1) of the Constitution, the bill, could I say to Deputy McGrath, does not propose any relevant changes to those constitutional provisions. I think it's important to note that here in the House this evening. Again, can I thank all the deputies for their contribution on this bill, and I hope that we can get a speedy passage of the bill through the House here so that the bill can be enacted. Thank you very much indeed, Cathaoirleach.
Thank you